We Need to Talk strikes fear into the hearts of most.
But we're breaking down that scary declaration on the Talking Couple podcast. I'm Deshaun.
And I'm Laurie. We're married.
Both from the South, but made the cross-country move to LA.
And are busy pursuing our careers. Even with the demands of life, we aim to put our marriage first. Every other week, we share personal experiences from our own relationship to help other couples spot red flags, get fresh insight,
and ultimately strengthen their partnerships. We get real, raw, and sometimes a little uncomfortable to give you the tools to change your life. Hello, world, and welcome to the Talking Couple podcast, episode number 103. Whether you're in a relationship or just looking for one, this is the show for you.
We're not afraid to tackle tough topics and share personal stories that will hopefully inspire individual growth and a relationship revolution. On today's episode, we're talking about setting your relationship up for success, or I guess we should say setting yourself up for success in a relationship. I am so excited about this topic. I've been looking forward to this discussion all week.
So joining us today on this episode is our good friend Joel Drazner. He's a resilience coach with a master's in spiritual psychology. He's a former radio show host, keynote speaker. He's worked with a variety of clients and dealing with stress and performance as well as anxiety.
Yeah, we needed that earlier, didn't we? Fun fact about Joel, he's in the business of inner peace, but he's a fighter at heart. Isn't that right, Joel? You were actually in several fight scenes in the 1980s movie Raging Bull with Robert De Niro.
Oh, I should have specified. I'm in the stands watching the fight scene.
Oh, the stands. Okay.
It was atmosphere, right?
Atmosphere, but it was a good 2-week gig back in the previous century when they were making that classic film.
That's a safer spot in the stands for sure.
Definitely.
A lower pay grade, unfortunately.
So welcome. Thanks for joining the Talking Couple podcast. Before we dive right in, because you know I'm ready, let's break the ice a little bit more and
sort of like get to know a little bit more about Joel and his expertise and what he does. And so just wanted to see, like, what exactly does a resilient coach do?
You skipped the icebreaker.
Oh.
Yeah. I know. I don't want to answer
up.
that question feeling frozen in a black and white.
Yeah, we can't let Joel off the hook and not ask him the hardest question of the episode.
Okay. So what is the one thing that you hate but everybody else loves?
Okay. Now we haven't pulled everybody because they're hard to wrangle, but all the easier now at this time of world condition. But okay, I'm hearing in advance the mind slamming on everybody else listening to this, but my candidate for that would be hip hop music.
Yo.
Now, let me explain.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the music, as there are many tunes in that genre that I like. I don't like the term. I don't like that term, hip hop music. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm of an old guy generation. But it reminds me of like the bunny hop that was a dance we used to do to our embarrassment at kids' parties. And it also reminds me of the possibility of hitting an age where you break your hip. So it's like combining both of those two things together that I don't really enjoy so much. And actually, as I'm mentioning this, I think it comes from something I got from my dear departed mother a long time ago, who would never eat yogurt because of the name.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting.
Huh.
Isn't it? Yeah. Actually, the sound of the word was a deal breaker on whatever the content of the word was. At least in my situation, I do like to listen to some of the music.
Yogurt. That is kind of an odd word. I wouldn't have thought it was non-appetizing, but
yeah.
I think she said
I've never thought of that.
Any food that started with a Y, she just couldn't get her mouth around.
Interesting. Yeah, that's definitely a fun fact.
To me, like, hip hop is it can be a turn off as far as like a style of music, because you're mixing the two of the dancing as well as like the artistry in it. And so
Yeah.
I do feel like it could have been a different word or two words instead of just hip hop. Like, oh, we're jumping around. And I
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
See that.
Okay, at least there's two of us now that are,
Yeah.
are in this possibly growing movement that I might start after
Exactly. We're gonna start something. We're gonna start something. Reading hip hop. They're like, what are you talking about? This has been going on for years.
Let's not start another revolution of some sort.
Yeah, or reason to destroy any relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so now we can get to it.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can get to it. Yeah.
So I guess let me go back to my question of, so what exactly does a resilient coach do?
I so appreciate you asking that question, because most of the time when I say that, people will say something on the order of, "Oh yeah, resilience. I could use more of that," or that's a worthy target to have, or I'm sensing that I'm not so much that, and how can I increase my units of resilience?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I get to tell them that actually what I do is I point you to the fact that you are made of unbreakable resilience, and you always have been. And it's only because of lifelong conditioning that has you looking in another direction, that has you not see that. And it's that same conditioning that is the catalyst for the suffering in all relationships and any other type of suffering that humans go through.
That's so interesting. Because, no one goes into a relationship thinking or hoping that it's going to fail. So what do you think is the biggest indicator of success or failure in a relationship?
Okay. And my particular expertise, as opposed to many of the guests you're likely to have in this series, is that I have oodles of experience in messing up relationships.
Don't we all?
I have a long history of field research, and I've really perfected it over time.
Right.
So I can speak from that level of expertise. And in my case, in every failed relationship, I've now realized that, both for myself and for people that I share what it is that I do with clients and what have you, is a simple misunderstanding of how the whole shebang of life works. That could sound arrogant, but I'll explain.
Okay.
So maybe if I say this, we can work into it. One of the things with a relationship is that it really sucks when people who have never ever had the ability to make you happy, whole, or complete fall down in their responsibility to make you happy, whole, or complete.
Yeah.
And the reason why that transpires in a relationship, whether we're talking about a romantic relationship or a family relationship or business or amongst friends, is that we don't know who we truly are.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been conditioned from early on, usually even by people who raised us and loved us dearly, but didn't understand themselves. They fostered this misunderstanding that who we are is a puny, vulnerable, separate self, partitioned off from the whole of a world filled of other objects and other people and circumstances. And that as we went through life, there were many paths we should try to take and a lot of landmines we could step up along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that our wholeness or completeness or fulfillment and true happiness depended on doing certain things right, and depended on getting to a place in space and time that, let's call point B.
Okay.
Like where we are right here and now is point A. But this point B, where something or many things are different, is a place we need to be at And until and unless we can get there, the distance we perceive between those 2 points is the exact measurement of our suffering, of our struggle. Now, when it comes to relationships, we've just made a very specific misperception that that point B takes the form of a certain other. And when I'm with that person, my missing piece, or the unfortunate thing that the Jerry Maguire movie fostered so long ago, you complete me.
Mm-hmm.
Once that was ingrained early on in a person, then life has been an endless quest of finding that missing piece, finding that thing that's absolute proof that who I am right now at point A has that person shaped hole in my completeness.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate to that. I mean, Deshaun and I have touched on a little bit in our show about how we approached our relationship and kind of why we think we work.
Mm-hmm.
And I firmly believe that a lot of it has to do with really knowing who we are. And because we met a little bit later in life, we did a lot of work on ourselves and kind of trudging through that muck to kind of get to the other side, and trying our best not to come into the relationship broken or anticipating or expecting that the other person would complete us. We kind of wanted to be together because we wanted to, not because we needed to, for whatever reason. So I think that's kind of what you're trying to say, and maybe kind of give your perspective on that.
Sure. And that's, if what you just said was the contents of a duck pond, that's the duck or swan lake. That's the swan part gliding on the top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's look at those paddling feet underneath it that support that duck actually gliding through the pond.
Yeah, I liked the graceful swan reference better.
Yeah, consistently. Chuck the duck, insert the swan. Okay. Okay. So, yes, I love everything you said, and it's so apparent in our few interactions that you have that type of relationship. It's really beautiful to see.
Oh, thank you.
Now, to support that, because a lot of people will hear that and they'll think, oh, yeah, I've got to work on myself so that I could get into the same sort of thing. Mm-hmm. What if rather than working on a self, which ultimately bolsters the idea of this self being separate to begin with, we look at something deeper about what is the actual essence of our self to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And when we come to know ourselves as not separate from a world full of objects, situations, circumstances, other people, then we get to know ourselves as, and this is not a bumper sticker. I want to be careful not to suggest a philosophical idea that I'm trying to sell people on. But when I work with people, I have them see this through their own actual thought experiment experience. But to see that who we truly are is not divorced or separate from anything or anything else. There's one shared being that we are. And this true self that we are is not lacking for anything.
Yeah.
And when we know ourselves as that, when we have a felt understanding of that true nature, that true identity, it will make less and less sense to seek anything from a world out there, including someone we may want to share our lives with in a romantic relationship or familial relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a phrase that many of us have heard through philosophies and religions and self-help things like know thyself. But I would put that under knowing thyself under an electron microscope. Who are you really? And when you could see that there is no actual separation between you and a world out there, unlike how most people live as if who they are resides in a physical body most of the time between like behind their eyeballs to their chest bone. And they think, oh, I'm in here. And I make all of my decisions in life, including the partners I pick, the jobs I pick, the possessions I acquire, the trips I go on, you name it, in terms of either enhancing this limited person inside of here or defending it against perceived threats from outside circumstances and people. But if we go to the heart of our experience, we cannot find a separate person that exists inside a body where there's a hard border between that person and the rest of the world.
Yeah, that makes
and
sense.
At any point this isn't clear, stop me, because I don't want to go too far afield and talk about things that weren't clear.
So how does one know thyself?
Yeah. So, okay. So there are, if I'm working specifically with somebody, there's often a thought experiment or so that I could run through with somebody. Actually, there's an unlimited amount of that.
Right.
To have them start to see or start to recognize something that in the back of their minds they have a glimmer of almost universally. Okay. And that is that every circumstance, every feeling state, every thought that we go through, behind that, there's a vaster arena in which that is occurring in. Okay. What I tell people right off the bat often is that there is unlimited inner peace behind any of your circumstances, no matter what they are. And if you're game, we could do it like a 2-minute thought experiment if that's worthy of the.
Let's do it.
The
Sure.
podcast. Cool.
Yeah, we can do it.
Great. So, and this is something, it's a modification of something I got from one of my great teachers, a guy named Rupert Spira. Just in case any of you have heard something like this, I'm happy to give him the credit for it. But to take a moment, settle into yourselves, close your eyes. I'm not there, so I can't go through your wallets or purses. Now, in order for anything to arise or appear, it has to appear within something, in the same way like the words of a page of a book have to appear on a page. So for anything to arise, it has to appear within something, even if that something is a vast empty field of nothing. So as I'm talking, I want you to allow whatever thought or series of thoughts that come up, just come up until you see that they are arising within a vast field. But rather than paying attention to the content of your current thought, and if that thought dissolves and another one comes, that's fine. But rather than paying attention to the content of it, I want you to turn from the thought and look at the actual space within which this thought is arising. Explore that space, look around, see how far does it go in any direction. Can you find a limit to that space? Is there a drywall that this is the end of the space in which my thoughts appear? And if so, where does that border appear? What sort of space does that appear in? Or does the space seem to go on without border as far as the mind's eye can see? And what is the nature of the space itself? What are the feeling states of it, the qualities of it? Is the space within which your thought is arising, is it frenetic and intense, or is it calm and peaceful like a placid lake? Really allow yourself to feel that space, the space within which this thought that you have now has arisen. And really, if you think about it at all, it's the space in which every thought you've ever had, which has come and gone, other than the one you have currently, has arisen within and dissolved back into. So allow yourself to just bask in that space for another maybe 10 seconds or so. And then, without rushing it, allow yourself to come gently back to the room. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Okay.
That was a really cool experiment.
Cool. And so tell me a little bit about, describe that space itself. What was it like for you?
For me, it was like open, like the ocean. And I could just like feel myself like relaxed and easy. There was no barriers around, like there was no walls or anything that I would like, would stop me from seeing anything. But yeah, that's sort of like what I was envisioning, and just being out in that open space of the ocean.
That's cool. Mine was not, I couldn't identify any kind of anything to it. It was just dark. It was just black, no beginning or end. But it wasn't like, it didn't feel like a vast emptiness or anything like that. Almost kind of the feeling of when you put the blankets over your head and you're enveloped under the blankets. So it didn't feel cold or sterile or scary because it was just completely dark.
Mm-hmm.
But
it kind of had that feeling of security.
Yeah, beautiful in both descriptions, because you're describing in your own words that are unique to you a space that is devoid of any quality, because every quality arises and dissolves within that space and nothing sticks to it. And if we worked over time, you would see that not only do all of your thoughts arise and dissolve within that space, but also all of your perceptions, like every image or sound that you hear, these things are always changing, right? Everything we see from as early as we can remember till now, it's changed either subtly or overtly all day long. Every time we blink, we change what we see and change back to what's in the room. So every one of those thoughts and every one of those perceptions, sight, sound, are known by this knowing space. And other than your current perception or your current bodily sensation, you feel things, pain, smells, touches, tastes, or your thoughts, every one that you've ever had, save what you're feeling, perceiving, and thinking right now, has come and gone throughout the entirety of your life. But this knowing space within which all of these perceptions, sensations, and thoughts have arisen and dissolved has never been absent from you for a nanosecond. So what we might say actually is that who you truly are is the knowing space within which all of your experience arises and dissolves. Who you are is not any of the temporary content that arises within that space, although it can seem at times, when the energy or the feelings around it are very vivid and intense, that's who we are, and we're locked in that space and nothing's ever going to change, and we're losers and we're incomplete or we're angry or we're upset. But our evidence is that has been changing from as far back as we can remember, and will continue to do so. The only thing that never changes is our true self which is the knowing presence that knows all of the contents of our experience.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts based on what you said that come to mind is I feel like it's easier to be in that knowing space when it's not filled with toxic thoughts.
Yeah,
So
okay.
in a way, you know, one of the things and part of the work that I did on myself in like my early 30s, I guess it was.
So like last month.
I wish. But was really paying attention to the thoughts that were in my head and almost being shocked at the thoughts and the things I was telling myself day in, day out. So really stopping those and questioning them. Oh, are you really a failure? You know, like, oh, I'm so stupid. Like when you make a mistake, you know, immediately go into that super negative place of, oh, you're just so stupid, or something bad happens and you immediately go to that negative space of everything always goes wrong to me. Why is my life so hard? Or what have you? And so really questioning those thoughts and stopping and saying, is that really the situation, or have a little grace for yourself, or what have you? And so being able to do that made it easier to kind of work through the stuff, because then you weren't in just so much turmoil. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense, and a lot of my study towards my psychology degree, things of that nature would come up, and that's great. And what I ask clients to do, because some of them have that same sort of background that you were describing so well there, is to then peel the onion layer some more and realize that even the examination of the content of my thoughts is also a thought that's arising to analyze my thoughts, and the entirety of it, the original thoughts, the analysis of it, and what I think about whether I like or dislike the exercise are all arising in that space that is ever present and doesn't diminish at all with any of the thoughts that come and go within that space. So the more I turn away from at first turn away from the content of my experience to know myself, or another way to say it, to shine the light of my attention on the awareness that I am eternally and infinitely. And then as that knowing awareness kind of go back to a world filled with stuff and other people and relationships and projects and circumstances, while all that may be the same on the outside, it's now happening it's happening with me being a part of that. And now I'm a Jewish Buddhist, so I don't know much about the Christian Bible, but there's a phrase, something about be in the world, but not of the world.
Right.
So knowing ourselves as this one shared being, some religious people might say it's God's shared being, or scientists might say it's the one shared energy. In Buddhism, we might say it's the mystic principle itself that everything is a modulation of. But to know yourself as that now changes the nature of what we call relationships with other people, whether they be on any plane, whether it's romantic or work-wise or whatever. We're now seeing, because we only know another person through what we can see and hear of them. We can reach out and touch them, and we have the thoughts that come and go about them.
Mm-hmm.
And the entirety of our experience with another person in a relationship is actually appearing within that knowing space within us. It's not a solid thing out there separate from us that we need to maneuver or manipulate in order for this separate puny being to be okay. Now merely the knowing of who we truly are absolves us of the need to have others be anything other than what they are, because their appearance has no direct impetus into our own wholeness or completeness or feeling state.
Yeah. So why is that so hard to do?
So because like anything that you've been, if you trained yourself to play classical guitar and you worked at it for decades,
Mm-hmm.
it would be hard not to play it well. We collectively have trained ourselves to be virtuosos in seeing illusory separation. So, especially when we first hear about it, it sounds undauntingly difficult or challenging. It sounds like a nice idea, but I can't get there. Maybe if you meditate on a mountaintop, you can get there, or something like that. But what I find in my work with people is just a little bit of gentle pointing and explaining in the beginning, and the dominoes start to fall in a relatively short amount of time. So like what I do that's different than like a therapist who might agree, oh yeah, you have a difficulty and we have to get to the root of it, and we might find other difficulties along the way, and we don't know how long this relationship's going to end, and maybe it'll never end, but we'll continue meeting because we'll feel good temporarily from what it is that we talk about. What I know is that you don't have a problem. You have a perspective that's just looking in the wrong direction from who you are. And when you know who you are, you'll be whole and complete and not need a outside technique or tool or procedure to make you even more better at the end of the procedure or tool.
And I mean, that carries over into everything, right?
Everything.
Well, it does.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
It does. So
It carries over to everything.
yeah, definitely. So I want to say, like, how could the relationship work if there's two broken people? Could that ever get fixed in a way that they can actually grow together? Or how do you feel? Like, is there
if one person has this sort of enlightening viewpoint, to your point, to your, that we kind of, this previous exercise we went through, if someone worked towards that and on that, but the other person didn't have that awareness.
Yeah.
So there's actually at least two different questions in what you just said. They're related. If you had come to me, Deshaun, and you said, I'm in this relationship and there's two broken people, which obviously that's not the case, your case, but
Right.
hypothetically, if you were somebody who came to me, I would quickly disabuse you of that illusion to begin with. There's no such thing as a broken person.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you extrapolate from what it was we were just talking about, there's no such thing as a person per se. There's the perception of a bunch of thoughts and ideas about an identity that we call a person, which is tripped up by the illusion that there's a something that exists in a body separate from a world out there. We've only just forgotten what's actually true, that who we are is the knowing space that knows a body, knows our thoughts, knows our perceptions. Once that illusion is seen through, it won't make, the words won't add up that, oh, I'm a broken person. There's just like, oh, I see, I'm forgetting this understanding of who I am from time to time.
Okay. I like how, I think you said something to the effect of, you're just looking in the wrong direction, or I love that.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a broken person, because the person that would see him or herself as a broken thing does not exist as a contiguous entity. And the one who knows what looks like a broken person is actually whole, complete, and eternal, and infinite, and therefore needs no fixing.
Okay, I'm going to have to listen to this back about 10 more times and try to glean something each time.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's so much here, and we could probably do part 2. But for this episode, at least, I think we've got some nuggets to chew on, and maybe we can come back to you with a part 2 at some point. This has been like a really, really interesting, deep conversation, and it really makes me want to think through that even more. Because you've brought so much to the table that I had not even ever thought of before.
Especially, going to that space and really like putting yourself in a different perspective of like, who am I? Like, we really just thinking about it and breaking it down is, for me, like really interesting to work more on the different aspects of me.
Yeah. And I need to like think about, maybe I'm looking the wrong direction. That seems a lot easier to like, in more tangible way to think about it than trying to solve a whole lot of things, right? Like just, maybe you just shift your focus a little bit. I like that.
Great. Okay. So let's end part 1 on that. And I'm always happy to do part 2. This is the happiest, most compelling conversation that's been ongoing in my life for the last several years. So maybe to have a springboard into looking to the quote unquote right direction, you could just gently, this is like a non-practice practice. You can gently ask yourself the question, what is it that is aware of all of my experience?
Okay.
And just sit with that. Don't try to answer it. Like just try to sit with that for a moment. And that will point you back inward. Or even a simpler way you could say it, you can ask yourself the question, am I aware?
I like that.
And so more to explore in another conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Joel, thank you so much. We always close the show with questions from our listeners. You can send those to us at the feedback at thetalkingcouple.com. But for today's episode, I think you've already asked the question that I think we'll ask our listeners.
Yeah.
Am I aware? Are you aware? I think that's the best way to close the show.
I love it.
Thanks for joining us for the Talking Couple podcast.
We have a favor to ask. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to The Talking Couple. We'd love to hear from you.
You can also find us on social media. We are The Talking Couple on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.